Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Just picking up before getting into the centrality of what I want to say, one or two things that have been said in the debate so far. Jenny Mara talked about and seemed to imply, perhaps she didn't, that really each type of AHP should be represented on local boards. And I'm glad to see she was not intending to say that, because certainly the smaller a board is, the more effective it is. And just simple arithmetic tells you why that should be so. If you have 3 people on a board, the links between the people are 3 in number. If there's 6 people on a board, they've multiplied to 15. If there's 9 on a board, it's 42. And when you get to a dozen, it's 74 links to each of the people. And that is why when boards get bigger, they slow down and impede delivery. I will.
I thank the member for giving way. Just for clarity, it was not my intention to suggest that every allied health professional is represented on the board. As Maureen Watt and I made clear, there are so many, but perhaps there is some representation of allied health professionals as a group.
Stevenson.
I understand where the member is coming from. That's a helpful clarification. However, I don't think boards are about representation of anybody. I think boards are about getting the right mix of skills, knowledge and experience. That is likely to lead to HPs being there, but I don't think they should be there as of right simply because they're HPs. Now, let's turn to the subject itself and not get bogged down too much in management speak, which we might otherwise do. I think all of us in our casework that we do as constituency and regional members, it will give us a pretty good insight in some of the issues that are around this subject. People rarely come, particularly older people, with an issue which neatly fits into it's the Scottish Parliament's responsibility. In particular, older folk, I often find when you examine the issue they have, it touches on what Westminster is responsible for, what we are responsible for, and what the Council is responsible for. And our job is to tease out the issues and find out who can help. So therefore, the whole debate which has been around breaking down barriers, I think gets to the essence of it. And our role in our constituency casework is to do that, and the role of allied health professionals and everyone involved in social care and the health service is there to do that. Jim Hume also talked about psychiatric help, and I absolutely agree with him there. And I was particularly pleased that the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service workforce has risen by 24% in the last 5.5 or so years. And that contains extra help particularly for young people with mental health problems. That's really important. Now, it's important too that we look at what HPs are. When my father became a GP in the 1940s and spent most of his working life in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, there weren't very many formal recognised AHPs around. My father's probably slightly unusual that he used to send people, if he felt he couldn't do very much for them, to people like chiropractors, which was somewhat frowned upon by his professional colleagues, but actually for a proportion of the people he sent, it worked. Now, of course, things are much better because we have formal qualifications, we have training, we have protocols for integrating that particular discipline and many others into the range of support that we can provide. The whole point about the way we now work together is that it's based on evidence-based models of practice and focus on rehabilitation after illness or difficulties of one sort or another, integrating social care and healthcare. That's the important thing that we want to see. Now, of course, we've got the benefit of a progress report from February, and that tells us some interesting things. First of all, it tells us about the local delivery plans. We've got planning down at the grassroots. But, of course, planning is the easy bit. It's delivering on the content of the plan that's actually the difficult bit. I spent much of my life managing very large projects, and my guru was Professor Fred P. Brooks, who wrote the wonderful book, The Mythical Man Month. And his advice to anybody who's involved in a project of any kind is just do it. and cut the size of your team if you want to do it faster. There are things that we see in the report which are quite interesting that have come up in this Parliament before. We see substantial progress on foot care guidelines. Now, that sounds a very simple little thing. I know that Mary Scanlon, in particular, I think I'm correct from memory, has spoken about that on a number of occasions over the piece in the last decade, probably. And if we keep people moving, their health improves. If we keep people moving, they can go to the shops, their social interactions are better. So sometimes it's quite straightforward interventions that make a difference, and so therefore it's fairly good to see that we're making progress. As we get older, the risk of falls grows. And again, on falls, we're seeing progress, but also opportunity for more progress. So I think the audit which the Labour Party's amendment to the motion refers to, in essence, what you might get from an audit is already being delivered. I think if you have a formal audit, you send in the auditors. All that you actually end up doing is slowing people down and diverting effort away. So I think the choice of word may be wrong. What I would suggest we might consider doing, which isn't currently on the agenda, instead of perhaps looking at an audit, and I would encourage the Labour Party to think about this, and all colleagues, is perhaps having, like local authorities now do, having an improvement service that makes sure the good practice, of which there is plenty among the range of professionals we're talking about here, is picked up, refined and presented to those who will benefit from knowing of the good practice of others. If we're to spend more money on oversight, I suggest that might be more like the kind of oversight that we'll do. Now, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, let me just, like Jane Baxter briefly did there, draw on some personal experience. About 30 years ago, I had a tingling sensation start at the back of my neck, and over a period of months, it eventually reached the outside of my thumb and the outside of a finger. And at this point, I decided it was perhaps time to go and consult a professional, and I did so. And the moment I described the symptoms, he knew exactly what it was. And he offered me 3 options. He said, we can send you for an operation to cut a little bit off your spine because you've got a trapped nerve and the bit will cut off. We can do acupuncture, or I can do manipulation. He then paused and said, and I can do the manipulation now. So I said, let's try manipulation. He sat me on the couch, put his knees on my shoulders, pulled my head up about half an inch, turned it through 90 degrees, folded it forward. There's a great crack. And he said, you'll be okay, but you'll be sore for a few days. That one intervention that lasted approximately 3 minutes has stood me in good stead for 30 years. That was an allied health professional really doing his job. I'm immensely grateful. I hope they all are as successful for everybody else. Presiding Officer.
Very glad you survived. Thank you very much.